neighbor parked in my spot for 20 days. So I made a legal move he'll never forget. I never thought I'd become that neighbor. The one who keeps track of whose car is parked where, who left their trash out too long, who calls the landlord for every little thing. I always figured I'd just mind my business, wave politely in the hallway, and live my quiet life. But then Trevor moved in. My building has limited parking. It's an old complex from the 70s with narrow garages and tiny backlots. A while ago, I managed to buy the deeded rights to a private parking spot right in front of my unit. It cost me, but it was worth every cent not to circle the block for half an hour every night. The first time I saw Trevor, he was hauling boxes out of a moving van, shirtless, blasting music from his truck. One of those muscle dudes who talks too loud on the phone and laughs even louder when no one else is joking. I helped him with his couch, tried to be friendly. He cracked open a beer right there and said, "Thanks, bro. You're a real one." For the first week, things were quiet. He'd nod at me in the hallway, sometimes ask if I knew a good taco place. Then one night, I came home late from work and found a beat-up black Jeep Wrangler sitting in my space. No note, no explanation. I double-checked the number painted on the curb. My number. I walked around the car, hoping I was wrong. I wasn't. I ended up parking 2 blocks away that night, trudging home in the rain with my laptop bag soaking through. The next morning, I slipped a polite little note on the windshield. "Hey, just a heads up. This spot is deeded and it's mine. Would appreciate it if you could move next time. Thanks." That evening, the Jeep was gone. I figured maybe he had guests over or someone didn't know. No big deal. Then it happened again. And again. The third time, I waited outside until I saw him coming down the stairs. I called out, trying to keep things chill. "Hey man, just wanted to remind you that the spot in front of my place is private. I've got the deed for it." He looked at me like I'd just asked him to repaint the building. "Oh, that? Yeah, I was just gonna run in real quick." "Chill, bro." "Sure, I get it. But it's been a few times. I need that spot. I get home late, and it's the only one I can count on." He took a long sip of his energy drink, shrugged, and said, "It's a parking spot, man. Not that deep." And just like that, he walked away. I started documenting every time he parked there. I took photos, kept a log on my phone. I tried talking to him once more after that. Even offered to help him talk to management if he needed his own spot. He just laughed. "You're real serious about asphalt, huh?" By day 10, I was beyond frustrated. I emailed the building manager, but they told me it was a civil issue and not under their enforcement. The police weren't any better. "It's private property," they said. "We can't tow unless it's blocking a fire lane or you have a court order." So I kept collecting evidence. It became a routine. I'd drive in, see the Jeep, take a picture, park 2 streets over, and walk. Sometimes he'd be sitting on his balcony watching me. Once, he waved and yelled, "Hope the cardio's good for you." There's something soul-crushing about being mocked in your own home. I started avoiding going out just to keep the spot. I skipped dinner invites, changed gym hours, even left work early just to beat him to it. But somehow, he always beat me. 20 days, 20. I counted every single one. The last straw came on a Tuesday night. I had a brutal day at work. Client blew up a presentation, my boss yelled at me in front of the whole team, and the rain had soaked through my coat again. I turned the corner onto my street, praying to see that little rectangle of space empty. Nope. There it was, his Jeep, like a middle finger. I pulled over across the street, headlights illuminating his car. I just sat there for a while, fingers clenched around the steering wheel, heart pounding with a mix of exhaustion and rage. And then I saw him step out onto his balcony, beer in hand. He raised it toward me and smirked. That was it. I didn't scream, didn't honk, didn't march up there to knock on his door. Instead, I took a photo of the Jeep, one more for the log. Then I pulled out my phone, opened my notes app, and wrote in all caps, "Start legal plan." He had no idea that smile was the last one he'd be flashing at me for a very long time. The next morning, I took a personal day from work and called an attorney. Not just any lawyer. I found a local real estate law firm with solid reviews and experience in property disputes. I walked in with a folder of printed photos, time-stamped, labeled, sorted by date. I brought a copy of my deed with the parking spot highlighted. I brought a map of the lot. I brought everything. The paralegal actually whistled when she flipped through it. "My guy," she said. "You built a whole case." I smiled for the first time in weeks. When the attorney came in, I explained everything. He leaned back in his chair, glanced through the photos, and nodded slowly. "Let me guess. You tried talking to him first." "Several times." "You have written documentation?" "Yep. Notes, emails, even videos." He tapped his pen on the desk. "Well, the good news is you're well within your rights. That spot is deeded. You can install physical barriers. You can tow him. Hell, you can sue him for interference of use. The bad news is it might take time." "I'm fine with time," I said. "I just want to do this right." He smiled. "I'll send a cease and desist letter first. That'll put him on formal notice. Meanwhile, I suggest you install a collapsible barrier, one of those ones with a key lock or a code. They're annoying but legal, and they make a point. I left the office feeling lighter. For the first time in nearly a month, I wasn't just reacting. I was doing something. That same afternoon, I ordered a heavy-duty foldable parking post with a combo lock. It arrived 3 days later. I took a screwdriver, a wrench, and a friend from work who was good with tools. We waited until Trevor was gone. His Jeep was out, probably parked in someone else's spot this time, and we installed the barrier, drilled it straight into the concrete, just like the HOA guidelines allowed. We even painted it safety yellow. Before I left, I snapped a photo and emailed it to my building manager just to be safe. That evening, I came home and parked in my newly protected spot. Folding the barrier down, locking it in place, and sliding into the space felt like a ceremonial victory. Trevor came back around midnight. I was half asleep when I heard tires outside, followed by a long pause, then a loud thud, followed by a scrape. I peeked through my blinds. He'd pulled up to my spot and hit the barrier. I saw him get out, stare at it, then kick it. Hard. The next morning, I found the barrier scratched but still solid. Trevor's Jeep was wedged into a nearby red zone. Illegal, but I didn't say a word. I just stood there, sipping coffee, admiring my barrier like it was a monument. That day, my lawyer's cease and desist letter was officially delivered. I have no idea if Trevor even read it. 2 days later, I was leaving for work when I saw something that stopped me cold. The barrier was gone, torn from the concrete. 4 bolt holes gaped up at me like open wounds, and paint chips were scattered on the ground. His Jeep was parked in my spot. I stared at it for a full minute, disbelief slowly boiling into rage. Then I took photos. All angles, tire marks, scratches, missing bolts. I walked back inside, called my attorney, and sent the evidence. He told me, "Perfect. This is the moment we needed." That evening, I didn't even try to talk to Trevor. I didn't leave a note. I filed a police report for property damage and trespassing. I submitted it with my video evidence, the deed, and a notarized statement. Then I followed my lawyer's instructions and filed for a small claims hearing. That night, Trevor banged on my door. I didn't answer. He banged again, louder. Still, I didn't move. Eventually, he walked away, cursing under his breath. The next morning, I found a note taped to my door. Sloppy handwriting. No name. You think you're smart? You're just a little rat with too much time. I took a photo of the note, added it to my collection. At the hearing date, my lawyer and I showed up. Trevor didn't. The judge reviewed everything, asked if I'd tried to solve the matter civilly. I handed him printed screenshots of texts and emails and explained my initial attempts to resolve it calmly. I showed him the damage to the barrier, the timestamps, the record of 20 consecutive days of blocked use. The judge looked at Trevor's empty seat and sighed. "Well," he said, "looks like your neighbor made this a whole lot easier." He ruled in my favor. Trevor was ordered to pay for the damage, for my legal costs, and for the installation of a new, stronger barrier. But the best part wasn't the money. It was the restraining order the judge included. Mr. Hastings is no longer allowed to communicate directly with you in any form. All further issues must go through property management or legal representation. I walked out of that courthouse with a grin that nearly cracked my face in two. But Trevor, he wasn't done yet. The day after the hearing, I came home to find dog feces smeared across my doormat. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't accidental. Someone had taken the time to step in it, or collect it, and grind it into the fibers. I stood there, grocery bag in hand, blinking at it like I couldn't process what I was seeing. I didn't even need to check my security camera, but I did anyway. At 2:37 a.m., a hooded figure, short, stocky, familiar gait, walked up to my door with a bag, looked around, and executed his little mission. Even with the hoodie up, it was obviously Trevor. Same shoes, same slight limp in his left leg from that weekend softball league he used to brag about. I saved the footage, uploaded it to the cloud, and filed a report. Again, this time, with both the building manager and the police. No one could say I wasn't playing it by the book. Still, they told me it would take time to process, and without a direct ID in the footage, they couldn't do more than document the incident. Management gave him a warning. 2 days later, I came out to find a key scratch running down the length of my car, from headlight to taillight, deep, like someone wanted me to feel it in my bones. Trevor, of course, was suddenly on his best behavior, waving cheerily when I walked by, whistling in the halls, holding doors for neighbors. No one could believe he was the guy I described. I started to feel like I was losing my grip. It wasn't just the car or the door or the harassment. It was the way he smiled at me when no one else was looking. Like this was all a game to him. Like my restraint was his playground. But I didn't flinch. I didn't scream. I didn't retaliate. I upgraded my security cameras, got motion-activated lights, changed my locks, and kept forwarding everything to my attorney. and I installed a new barrier, this time with reinforced steel bolts sunk deeper into the concrete, anti-tamper screws, and a GPS tracker embedded inside the post. If Trevor so much as touched it, I'd know. For a week, he did nothing. Then, on a Friday night, I came home and my parking spot was finally, blessedly, empty. I parked, locked everything up, and went inside. At 3:12 a.m., the GPS pinged me. The barrier had moved. I sprang out of bed and checked the camera feed. Trevor was standing in front of my spot holding a crowbar. He had a flashlight between his teeth and was circling the post, testing its stability. Then he crouched and started trying to pry it from the pavement. It didn't budge. He grunted, twisted, pulled harder. The GPS pinged again. I watched him yank, strain, and finally fall backward onto the pavement. He let out a string of curses and sat there, panting. Then the lights turned on. I'd set the motion sensors to alert the building's exterior floodlights. They blasted him in full view, just as a neighbor across the way came out for a cigarette and saw him crouched with a weapon. The neighbor yelled. Trevor scrambled to his feet and ran, dropping the crowbar as he went. I walked outside, still in pajamas, and picked it up with gloves. Another police report. Another video. Another statement from the neighbor who confirmed what he saw. Trevor denied everything, of course. Claimed someone must have borrowed his clothes or maybe faked the footage. But my lawyer was done playing nice. We filed for damages, again. But this time, we also submitted the full harassment timeline and demanded escalation. This wasn't about a parking spot anymore. It was about intimidation, malicious destruction, and a sustained campaign of personal harassment. My lawyer called it patterned behavior designed to provoke emotional distress. The judge agreed. I was granted a full protective order. Trevor was no longer allowed within 100 feet of me or my property. Any violation would result in criminal charges. Management got involved too. After all the documentation, they couldn't ignore it anymore. They launched a formal review of his lease and behavior. And just like that, Trevor disappeared for a while. No Jeep. No thuds in the night. No smirks in the hallway. It was quiet. Almost too quiet. I let myself relax. I went back to the gym. Slept without waking up to every little noise. I even started joking with neighbors again. And that's why it hit me like a brick to the chest when I came home one evening to find an unfamiliar car parked in my space. Not Trevor's Jeep, a silver sedan. Clean. Rental plates. I knocked on doors, asked around. No one claimed it. Then I got a text. No caller ID. Enjoy the new game, bro. See you soon. My skin went cold. That text, short, smug, and anonymous, was unmistakably Trevor. He couldn't be within 100 feet of me legally, but nothing stopped him from using someone else as his proxy. The sedan sat in my spot for 2 nights straight. No one came to claim it. No one entered the building. I left another polite note, just in case. Then I called the towing company. The driver showed up just after noon, chuckled when he saw how carefully the car was parked between the yellow lines. Guy knew exactly where to leave it, he muttered. He loaded it up, I paid the service fee, and the car was gone. That night, I got another text. This time, just one word. Cute. I showed everything to the police. They told me unless I could prove Trevor was behind the messages or had instructed someone else to park there, they couldn't do much. The texts were from a masked number. My lawyer advised we escalate again, and he filed a petition to formally press charges for violation of the protective order. It might take weeks, but it was something. In the meantime, I did what I'd been doing all along. I documented. Photos, logs, security footage. The barrier was untouched, thankfully. I started getting up early, walking past Trevor's unit. His curtains were drawn. No sign of him. And then one Sunday morning, I saw something strange. A new face? A woman, probably in her 40s, hauling boxes into Trevor's apartment. I watched from my window. She had keys. She moved like she belonged there. It turned out she was his aunt. And according to a neighbor, Trevor had gone to stay with a friend out of town for a while, which was code, I assumed, for he's laying low until this cools off. I wanted to breathe again. Wanted to believe it was finally done, but it wasn't. Over the next week, my mailbox was vandalized twice. Once, ripped open. The second time, filled with raw eggs. Another neighbor had their tires slashed. The building was on edge. Everyone was whispering. No one had seen Trevor, but I had my theory. I installed a second camera, this one hidden, pointed toward the building entrance. I told no one, not even my lawyer. 3 days later, at 2:04 a.m., the camera caught him. He wasn't alone. He had a hoodie pulled up again, this time with the hood cinched so tight it barely showed his nose. Next to him was a teenager, maybe 17 or 18, holding a bag. They weren't subtle. They walked straight to my parking spot, inspected the barrier, then dumped a bag of trash all over it. Fast food wrappers, coffee grounds, cat litter. Then they ran. The footage was clear enough for facial recognition. Trevor's friend, or nephew, or cousin, might have been the one dumping the trash, but Trevor was there. He was orchestrating it. I emailed everything to my lawyer and drove straight to the precinct in the morning. The detective I spoke with had been following the case since the court order was issued. When he saw the footage, he nodded slowly. "This'll do." Within 48 hours, Trevor was officially charged with violating the protective order, criminal mischief, and conspiracy to vandalize private property. They served the arrest warrant at 5:22 a.m. the next day. I know because I saw it happen. I was already up, sipping coffee in the dark, staring out my window, half hoping they'd get the wrong guy, just so I could finally be wrong about him. But they didn't. I saw them knock, heard the shuffle, then saw Trevor in boxers, led down the stairs in cuffs. I didn't smile. Not yet. The trial came quickly. His aunt testified that she thought he'd been staying with a friend. Said she didn't know he'd been sneaking in through the fire escape or that he still had a spare key. Said he had always been a good boy who made some dumb decisions. Trevor pleaded not guilty. He claimed I had a personal vendetta, that I manipulated the system, that I'd provoked him. But I had 20 days worth of parking violations, photos, police reports, the restraining order, camera footage, witnesses, the texts, even the tracking pings from my GPS-locked barrier. I didn't say much in court. I let the evidence speak. When the verdict was read, I exhaled for the first time in what felt like months. Guilty on all counts. The judge gave him a 6-month suspended sentence, 200 hours of community service, mandatory counseling, and permanent eviction from the property. As he left the courtroom, escorted by an officer, Trevor turned to look at me one last time. Not angry, just hollow, like he'd finally realized he wasn't the clever bully in some game. He was just another guy who parked in the wrong spot and learned too late that some people don't play by the rules, because they don't have to. They just follow them to the letter. The day Trevor was officially evicted, the whole building felt lighter. People nodded at me in the hallway now. Some of the neighbors I barely knew before stopped to ask what finally happened, whispering as if he might still be lurking around a corner. One guy from the 3rd floor, Martin, I think, shook my hand and said, "We were all hoping someone would finally do something." I didn't expect that. I'd spent so long fighting this thing on my own that I hadn't realized how many others he'd made uncomfortable. One woman, Mrs. Hill from Unit 2C, told me Trevor used to let his dog pee in front of her door and laughed when she complained. Another man said his car had been egged twice after he asked Trevor not to blast music late at night. Trevor wasn't just my problem. He was everyone's. And now he was gone. The barrier stood untouched. My mailbox was repaired. My car hadn't been scratched or keyed or blocked in weeks. For the first time since this started, I parked my car, walked up the stairs, and didn't look over my shoulder. But healing wasn't instant. Every time I heard a loud thud or unfamiliar footsteps near my unit, I tensed. I'd find myself checking my cameras even when nothing triggered the alert. My hand would hover over the lock twice before leaving the house. The paranoia wasn't irrational. It had been built up, layer by layer. Still, I forced myself back into routine. I rejoined my Saturday morning book club, met up with friends again without checking my car 20 times before leaving. Slowly, normalcy returned. One evening, about 2 weeks after the eviction, I came home to a note on my door. It wasn't threatening. It was typed, folded neatly. "Dear Jordan, I wanted to apologize on behalf of our family. My nephew Trevor has always been intense. He's facing the consequences now, as he should. I understand your actions, and I don't blame you. Honestly, I respect them. I'll be out of the unit by the end of the month. Sandra, 2A. I didn't know what to make of it at first. I read it twice, then 3 more times. Trevor's aunt, who had unknowingly let him sneak in and use her place to continue his little vendetta, had been quiet since the arrest. She'd kept to herself. Now, she was leaving too. I didn't reply, but I appreciated the gesture more than I expected to. I watched her move out one slow day at a time, alone, methodical. A few neighbors helped her with boxes. I didn't. And then she was gone. The property manager called me a week later and thanked me personally, told me they'd updated the building policies. Going forward, all deeded parking spaces would be more strictly enforced. They'd even cited my situation in a memo as a case study for tenants' rights and proper procedure. I guess I'd become the poster child for boundary enforcement. Funny, in a way. What started with one man parking in the wrong space turned into a lesson for the entire complex, a ripple effect of law, patience, and persistence. Still, it hadn't been easy. I hadn't just fought a guy with a Jeep. I'd fought gaslighting, invalidation, Passive-aggressive bullying so drawn out it almost felt invisible. Almost. And yet, I'd won. One night, as I was sitting out on the small balcony attached to my unit, watching the sun go down, a young couple pulled into the open spot next to mine. They waved at me, smiling as they stepped out. The guy nodded at my yellow barrier and said, "Smart setup." "Thanks," I said. "It's been tested." He laughed like it was a joke, and I let him think that. A few days later, I saw the two of them putting up fairy lights in their window. They were young, probably just moved in. She brought them muffins to the community mailboxes. He offered to carry groceries for Mrs. Hill. They were the opposite of Trevor in every possible way. I didn't say much to them beyond polite greetings. I just observed, but deep down, I hoped they never had to go through anything like what I did. Some lessons don't need to be repeated. I kept the barrier up, though, not because I was scared, because I'd earned it, and because if anyone ever tried again to push their luck, well, let's just say, I still had my lawyer on speed dial. A few months passed. Spring came early that year. The nights were warmer. The hallway no longer echoed with slamming doors or aggressive footsteps. My camera alerts were quiet. My barrier, still locked, still bright yellow, still standing like a monument to everything I'd endured. It wasn't about the parking anymore. Hadn't been for a while. I'd won that fight, sure. But what I really fought for was something less obvious. My right to feel secure, respected, heard. I never wanted to be the guy obsessing over a few feet of pavement, but when someone keeps stepping over the line, mocking you while they do it, you either retreat or push back. And I pushed back. Not by screaming or threatening or throwing punches. I used the rules. The same ones people like Trevor never think apply to them. And in the end, those rules became my shield. One Saturday morning, I was cleaning out my trunk when I noticed something wedged under the windshield wiper of my car. My heart rate spiked before I even saw what it was. I walked slowly, cautiously, hands cold despite the sun. But it wasn't a threat. It was an envelope. Inside was a single typed letter. The font was clean. The tone was strange, almost rehearsed. You probably think you won. Maybe you did. But people like me don't disappear. We just wait. Enjoy the empty spot while it lasts. No name, no signature, no proof it was him. But I didn't need proof. The envelope had no fingerprints. The building's cameras, I later checked, showed no one near my vehicle during the hours before I found it. Whoever dropped it knew the blind spots. I handed it to the police and forwarded it to my attorney. Neither could act on it. Not without direct evidence. And honestly, I didn't want to give it more attention than it deserved. It wasn't a real threat. It was a whisper, a final gasp from someone already irrelevant. So I let it go. Because at some point, you have to stop reacting to ghosts. That weekend, I took down one of my cameras. The one facing the stairwell. Not because I was naive, but because I was done living like every shadow meant war. The new couple, Sam and Julia, had settled in nicely. They brought me cookies that week. Apology cookies, they called them. For being loud while moving furniture. I hadn't even noticed the noise. We sat on my balcony sipping lemonade. Julia asked about the yellow barrier. Sam joked that I must have lost a car in a tragic accident to be that protective. I laughed. Then I told them the story. Not the whole messy saga, just the basics. About a guy who thought rules didn't apply to him. About persistence. About how long it took to be taken seriously. Julia's eyes widened. Sam just nodded, like he suddenly understood something unspoken. You really held your ground, he said. Yeah, I said. Took me a while to realize I had every right to. Later that night, I stood at my window looking down at my spot. My car sat there quietly, the barrier folded, my name etched into the concrete deed just below. Trevor hadn't ruined me. He'd tried. But instead of unraveling, I'd built something. Stronger boundaries, a better sense of self, even new friendships, ironically born out of the chaos. I'm not naive. I know people like Trevor don't always fade into the background. Some find new targets, some escalate, some really do wait. But the thing is, so do people like me. And the next time someone parks where they don't belong, whether in my space, my life, or my peace, I won't hesitate. Because now I know exactly what to do, and I've got the paperwork to prove it.